Well, it's Friday, July 29th, 11 in the morning at the Oconee branch of the Public Library. And would you tell me your name?
My name is George Reynard, and I live in Oconee County. I've been in Oconee County for about 2 years, where I moved from Atlanta.
I'm interested in hearing about what you remember of the World War II era.
Okay. First of all, let me say that I was drafted in November of 1942, and I was felt very fortunate to be drafted into the Air Force. At that time, they called it the United States Army Air Corps, and of course, we wore the same olive drab uniform as the Army wore. The Air Force sent me to a couple of training schools in the United States. The first one was Aircraft Armament School at Denver, Colorado. Then a few of us decided we'd like to go down to Florida, and we found out there was an air gunner school at Fort Myers, Florida. So we said, hey, we'll go to gunner school if you send us down to Fort Myers, Florida, because we'd been to Miami for basic training for about 3 weeks. So they did that, and the gunner school, air gunner school, was a 6-week course. And we graduated at the end of April of 1943, and they immediately sent the whole class right up to Presque Isle, Maine, which is a point of embarkation for the Air Force, to go overseas as replacement gunners for those who were expected to be disabled and shot up and killed during the big air onslaught of the summer of 1943. Arrived in England in May 16th, 1943, and was assigned to the 92nd Bomb Group. At that time, they were at Alconbury. At that time, this happened to be B-17, Flying Fortress Group, and at that time, the crews had to fly 25 missions, and when they finished 25 missions, if they finished, if they were fortunate, they returned back to the States and a little R&R, some recreation. And so the one mission I vividly remember, my experience as a flyer in the 8th Air Force, was my 15th mission on October 14th, 1943, to Schweinfurt, Germany. Our target at Schweinfurt was the ball bearing plant, a little town of Schweinfurt, Germany, in southeast Germany. Had 5 ball bearing plants. And of course, the powers that be considered that, and rightly so, that if we could destroy the ball bearing plants, we could certainly shorten the war. So I had been there once before. We had the first mission to Schweinfurt had been August 17th of 43, and it was a tough mission. A lot of fighters, a lot of flak, and you have to remember, of course, that we had no fighter escort in those days. And of course, this was before the invasion of Normandy in 44, June 44. That day, I was fortunate that day to be flying as the Tozzer, the enlisted bombardier, because they only used one bomb site per squadron, and everybody bombed off the lead squadron bombardier. And so when he opened his bomb bay doors, he opened yours. And they called us Tozzer because all we did was hit the toggle switch when the flare from the lead squadron bombardier appeared. And so we were briefed on 1,000 fighters that day, and they had 291 B-17s on the way. And matter of fact, the 92nd Bomb Group led the 1st Air Division that day over the target. So we were the first guys to come in. We were the first guys to get hit, and they were that particular day. They apparently knew where we were coming because this target, Schwenken, was very, very heavily defended by flak fighters, and we were just turning on the initial point of the bomb. Actually, well, we're just about to turn on the initial point of the bomb run. I had my bomb bay doors open. We had 6 1,000-pounders. We were going to supposedly, hopefully, drop on the target. And just as we were about to turn on the initial point, we were hit by rockets. They had ME-110 light medium bombers sitting way out of our gunners' range, lobbing rockets, air-to-air rockets at us. And they also were doing some air-to-air bombing. They had planes up above us trying to hit us, dropping bombs on us, trying to bomb the air, trying to bomb us out, because they were very desperate as far as, but these Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s, they were excellent, excellent fighters. And they really knew what they were doing, and they would come in on us. We got hit several times, and finally, just as we were turning, we were hit by the rockets, by a couple of rockets, and we also got hit by flak. We had 2 engines out and on fire, and we started losing altitude, and of course we dropped back from the formation. We flew in a V formation, and of course that was a signal for the German fighters, the ME-109s and the Focke-Wulf 190s, to come in and finish us off, which they decided to do. The fire started back through the plane, and of course I was down in that plexiglass nose, the V-17. Also, the bomber and navigator shared that little compartment down below the pilot's compartment. And the pilot said, "Hey, this is it. We can't make it." So first thing I did was hit the toggle switch and let go of the bomb, because I didn't want a radar or something to hit that, blow the plane up. I'd seen that happen before. You'd be flying along, and all of a sudden, your friend out there on the left side or the right side just be a puff of smoke and then nothing. So we, of course, first thing we did was grab our parachute packs. We always wore the harness, but the little chest pack just clipped on them. And the navigator and I had one heck of a time trying to pull that hinge pin out of the escape hatch, the forward escape hatch. On the ground, it would have been very easy to pull the thing, bang it out, and there you go, blown out. So when we finally got it off, it seemed like eternity, of course, was probably just a matter of seconds. But we were scared and young, and felt a little too young to die. But I was very fortunate. I didn't get hit. And anyway, when we got the door off, he said, "You go ahead." And I said, "Oh, you go ahead." We'd never bailed out before because the Air Force. They said that there's no use practicing parachute jump when you have to do it right the first time. So finally I said, "Hey, I'm getting out of here myself." So I hung my legs out through the escape hatch, put my hand on the handle of the parachute, and started count to 10 to clear it. They told you, one thing they told you to do, if you had to bail out, to make sure to count to 10 to clear the aircraft, because apparently people would get very excited and pull the thing and hang up on your parachute, hang up on the tail assembly or something like that. And so anyway, I started to count to 10. I don't remember a thing then until the parachute had opened, because we were flying over the target that day at 23,000 feet, which is almost 5 miles up. And of course you need oxygen to survive, and they had these little walk-around oxygen bottles in the airplane, but nobody thought of that. first thing we thought about, the plane was going down on fire. Let's get the heck out of there. So we did. And but when I came to, I think what happened, I blacked out as I, was floating down before my, because of lack of oxygen. And but anyway, I was floating down and saw the little pilot chute up there, and then all of a sudden I saw JU-88 come circling around. I said, "Oh, this guy's coming in to finish me off." So I tried to kind of limp over like I was, injured or dead or something. Maybe have a little compassion. But he went on around, and then I thought to myself, I had no sensation of falling. And I thought, gee, I was, I guess, about 125 pounds at that time, and I thought, maybe I'm not heavy enough to carry this thing to the ground. I got a little worried. But gradually I noticed the ground started coming up a little by little, got a little closer, and then I tried to remember what they told us back in the squadron. You have to bail out to make sure to roll over and shoot. And by that time, boom, my tailbone hit the ground, and I landed in a farmer's field, and they were gathering hay. They were, some of them had, a couple of them had pitchforks, and they came running at me, jabbering in German, and Amerikaner Luftgangster, that's the Air Force. We were bombing our towns and cities, and so very shortly after that, there came a car with the German local police. It was a chip-burning truck, actually. They were conserving gasoline. Polesti had been their big source of oil was Polesti oil fields in Romania that they had captured, and of course, our bombers had hit that several times, and of course they were feeling the pinch of fuel. After of course, as I say, this was long before the invasion. Our troops we were way in the middle of Neverland. And, by the way, the Germans got the most aircraft they'd ever gotten to that day, 60 B-17s, 220%, got down 20%, and there were 10 men on each crew, and 600 people. Of course, all of them didn't live through it. We were very fortunate. I was fortunate. Our radio man was killed. Our all-turret gunner was killed, and the pilot and two others. The top turret gunner was very badly injured by a 20 millimeter through his leg, and the tail gunner was grazed by a 20 millimeter from one of the enemy fighters. And so the pilot went back to make sure everybody was out of the aircraft before he got out, and he saw the top turret engineer, which was right behind him. So he pulled him down to the escape hatch, pulled his parachute up, and just threw him out. And he said later, I talked to an engineer who had been injured and thrown out to the pilot. He said just as he cleared the aircraft, he was about half out of it anyway. He said the aircraft went into a vertical spin, pinning the pilot into a centrifugal force. Apparently, just he couldn't get out. But the rest of it, of course, that was the most exciting mission I flew. They were all scary, I'll say that. And I was really looking forward. I thought, well, I had 15, and of course I only really did 14 and a half. I didn't return on the 15. But it was an exciting time. Of course, we were all, let's say, very scary. And the flak was really another thing. Not only the fighters, the flak, you could see it. After you could see it, you didn't need to worry about it because it had already burst. And what you didn't see, could really be disastrous. But we were then taken to the local jails, and the navigator was already in one of the cells, and he and I shared the cell there for a little bit. And then they took us to, started rounding up all those who survived and that were shot down, all the others. And they took us to a Luftwaffe youth center. And they had us all up there in a kind of a little auditorium. We were a pretty grisly looking bunch. Some of them blood and bloody and all that. I was very fortunate. Didn't get a scratch. And that's the day I remember, and this is commonly referred to as Black Thursday by a lot of historians. October 14th, 23. And it's also referred to as, by a lot of them, I may sound a little bit like I'm bragging, but a lot of them refer to it as the greatest air battle of World War II. I know it was for me, but then of course I wound up in Stalag 17B prison camp after interrogation by the Germans. That's the first thing a flyer does. They take you into a little town out from Oberrussel, called Oberrussel, out from Frankfurt, Germany, where the Luftwaffe had a large interrogation center. And of course, the reason for interrogating you was to find out who you were flying with. And of course, the thing is, they had all the information already. And they just wanted you to verify it. And of course, all I gave them was name, rank, and serial. We told them anything else, we got back to the States with the court-martial to get information helpful to the enemy. So, to say that pretty well wound up the war for me. Of course, one of the Germans' favorite phrases when they captured somebody was, "For you, the war is over." And, of course, I'd like to have gotten in my 25 missions. I had 10 more to go, but I didn't make it. So, but I was, as I say, I was lucky. I didn't get hurt.
Can you tell me about the end of the war?
End of the war, yes. Toward the end of the war, I will say that Stalag 17B, the prison camp I was in, by the way, it was all flyers, air crew, sergeants and above. They couldn't work here. According to the Geneva Convention, they didn't always stick to the Geneva Convention rules, but they did in this case. They couldn't work. Anybody who was a sergeant, buck sergeant, or above. So, of course, a lot of us wish we could have worked out on the farm because they tried to starve us to death. To be honest with you, fed you a lot of root babies and wormy soup and sawdust bread. Weren't for an occasional Red Cross package, which was intended for one man. It was a package of food, dried milk, and 4 packs of cigarettes. Cigarettes were money in the prison camp. Well, anyway, toward the end of the war, when the Russians, I should say that this camp was located in Krems, Austria, which was about 60 miles northwest of Vienna. And when the Russians started hitting Vienna in April, first 5, the Germans came in and told us they were going to move us out. At that time, we had 4,500 people, Americans. There were others, nationalities in the camp, but they kept the Americans separate from the other nationalities. There were English, French, Italian, Russians, Serbians. This prison camp, there was a lack of water. They'd turn on the water maybe once a day for about 10 minutes, shut it off. You'd get a bath if you were lucky. You'd get a shower, a full shower once every 8 to 9 months. And food was the big thing. We'd dream about food. And, it was, of course, they gave you, when you came in the camp, they gave you one little thin blanket and a synthetic metal spoon. And anyway, get back to moving us out. They decided they were going to move us out because they didn't want to be captured by the Russians. You know, the German armies had committed a lot of atrocities when they were invading Russia. And of course, the Russians had a little. They just wanted to get even, I guess. And anyway, so they came in on April the 8th, 1945. It was on a Monday, Easter Monday, and told us to form in groups of 500. And they marched us for 281 miles in 18 days. And finally, we reached the little town of Brent, Austria, which was, by the way, Hitler's birthplace. We marched through there. About a mile or two outside Braunau was a large forest called the Lech Forest. They strung a strand of barbed wire all around a very big area. This is your camp. And so we started tearing down trees and building lean-to. They had no tools or anything. And it was wet and cold in Germany at that time still. And but we knew the war was winding down. That was the one big thing. Of course, during that march, they didn't feed us. We had to just barter with soap. If we had soap or cigarettes, we bartered with civilians for food to keep alive. We slept out in the open. Well, one night we did sleep in the barn. One night, heavy rain, and the Germans didn't want to be out here in the yards either. So, but that's then we were liberated by about on May 3rd. We reached the Lech Forest on April 26, 1945, and on May 3rd, we were liberated by one of Patton's 18th Armored Division came through scouting party. And we were happy to see those guys. And that's what I remember most vividly about World War II. Of course, mine is just one of many. You know, there were during World War II there were 12,364,000 Americans in uniform. And my little story is just one of many, and not all that exciting, of course, either. But and again, I repeat, I was one of the most fortunate people who flew in the Air Force, having been shot down and taken to France. Our prison camp still has an annual reunion. We get 500 or 600 people there every year, in a different city every year. And, you know, you don't, people you share that kind of experience with for 19 months, you know, you're pretty close bond there. And so we kind of look forward. Of course, the women, I belong to an organization. As a matter of fact, since I moved to Oconee County, well, to the Athens area, I started a chapter of the American Ex-Prisoners of War, and called the Classic City Chapter. We have 18 members right at the moment, and we started about a year and a half ago. We have our charter from our national organization, the American Ex-Prisoners of War. And we're, no matter, an ex-prisoner of war can always talk to another. For a long time, a lot of us didn't say anything because we just wanted to get it behind us and, get on with life. And but the American Ex-Prisoner War Organization is a very close-knit organization. People, you can always talk to another one, just have a similar experience. So, again, that's the most vivid part of World War II. Good time.
Can you tell me about coming home?
Yeah. First thing they did when we were liberated, they took us into an aluminum factory to get us in out of the forest and American troops. And of course, the other thing that, one of the things they warned us that, now look, the first thing I know you want to do is eat everything you can find in sight, but that can be very, very hazardous because your stomach that all shrunken, that they shrink, lack of food for a year and a half. So we tried to, it was hard, it was sort of a big temptation. And then they moved us to a camp for, of course, the war in Europe had been over. They moved us to a camp near the coast of France, Camp Lucky Strike, and there was a camp in Chesterfield named after cigarettes, for people going home. I had flown over, see, with Air Transport Command carrying airplanes into combat, B-17s. And but they put us on troop ships at Lahar, and they were still traveling in convoys at that time because there were some German subs that hadn't reported in and they hadn't accounted for. So it took about 10 days to 2 weeks to get from Lahar, France to New York Harbor. And of course, it was a great day. I saw the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor. And I'd never seen it in person before. It's the first time I'd ever seen it. And then we were given, excuse me, 90-day convalescence furloughs after we got to our home. And of course, that's the first time I've been home since I got to service. But that's my story, and I'm going to stick with it.
Would you like some water?
Well, I'm all right. Okay.
You sure? Where did you live when the war started, and what was it like there?
Well, I'm a native of Springfield, Ohio, and I was drafted in the service, and I had worked, I knew I was going to be, I'd worked there for a little machine shop for a while before going into the service, kind of biding time, you know. And when I got home, of course, I decided I'd go to school on the GI Bill. And of course, I went to Ohio State University, which is in Columbus, about 45 miles east. And got out of there in 48, went right straight through summers and everything. And in 1948, I got out of school, and I met my, let's see, I worked in Columbus for a while, but I eventually, I was with Massey Ferguson in Columbus, a farm equipment accountant administrator, and they moved me, they transferred me to Charlotte in 1958. And then they closed that branch, and 3 years later, first part of 61, moved us to Chamblee, and spent 31 and a half years in Chamblee area, Atlanta. And we have a daughter who lives here, my wife and I, and so we made frequent visits there. She lived in Oconee County. She's a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. But we liked the area, and so we started looking for property. And when I retired in 1987 at age 65, and found a house that, well, it took us about 3 years to find the house we liked. So we're here in Oconee County. It's a great place to live, and we enjoy it.
Did you have other family members or friends who served?
In the service? No, I had two brothers, two older brothers, and an older sister and a younger sister. And none of them were in the service. My older brother was an attorney with labor the wage hour division of the Labor Department of Cleveland, Ohio, and they felt that he was, even though he had a commission, they asked him to resign his commission because he would do a better job with the Labor Department at that time during the war. So, and the next oldest brother had 3 children at the time, so he wasn't in service either. Of course, I still have a brother and sister living in Ohio. Just have one daughter, my wife and I. Matter of fact, we were married. My wife and I were married in Columbus, Ohio. Just about 6 months before we were transferred to Charlotte. So most of our married life has been in the South. We love it in the South. Of course, my wife is a native of Tennessee, so her parents had migrated to Ohio when she was a teenager. Of course, at first she went to school.
Do you think there were heroes or villains during that time?
Oh yeah, there were a lot of heroes and a lot of villains. Of course, among the villains were Adolf Hitler, and Benito Mussolini, and there's a guy's name in Japan.
Hirohito? Tozzer?
Tozzer. But yes, there's a lot of heroes, a lot of heroic acts done by a lot of people both in and out of the service. I certainly don't consider myself a hero because I just, a place where I had to do what I had to do. And it's certainly not a hero by any means.
Were there songs you remember or pieces of the culture that you remember from the World War II era?
Oh yeah. Yeah, a lot of songs. Of course, that was big band era. As a matter of fact, I had been a musician myself in Springfield, Ohio. I played sax and clarinet. I still got it rusting away in my attic right now. But yeah, I enjoyed the music. Jimmy Dorsey and Bud Miller, of course, and Tommy Dorsey, Frank Sinatra, of course. But I wasn't all that great a musician either, obviously, or I would have made a life work of it, but I decided that was just something to do, and but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. Being a part-time musician.
Would you tell a little bit about picking up the saxophone and playing?
Well, my mother was a widow when I was 6 years old. And, I was the next youngest. I had a sister about a year younger. So we were raised in a Lutheran children's home, all except the oldest brother. He was 9 years older than I. And it was again very upbringing, and I learned right from wrong. And of course, they had 120 children there during the Depression, and we were fed well. And we thought we were very strict. They were very strict on us. Of course, they had to be. And with that many children all in one area, one place. But when we got out of the home, I decided that, we lived around the corner. My mother took us out, one at a time, as she could. I spent 9 years in the home. And, my younger sister and I were taken out at the same time, 15, I think. And around the corner, we had a guy who had a huge alto saxophone for sale. And of course, I had a paper route inherited from my older brothers. So he said, I'll tell you what, I'll sell this thing to you for $45. He didn't pay me pay me $1 a week. So I did it. I took lessons from a German music professor who had been the instructor in the band we had at home at that time. And my older brother, Jack, he had played tuba in the band. So. But I didn't play anything until I learned, finally as I graduated. Learned to play the thing. I wanted to move better at home, so worked, earned the money to get to buy a brand new alto sax. My mother signed for it. She had to sign for it, and I paid it off, and then had to learn to play the clarinet and tenor saxophone too, in order to play with bands. You had to belong to the musicians union at the time, or you couldn't get a job. Of course, just part-time, full-time. It was fun. I enjoyed it. It's definitely a part of the pre-war era, and enjoyed doing it.
When was the last time you played?
Oh, let's see, it was probably, after I came back, after I got out of the service, a friend of mine called and wanted me to play a small combo at the DFW club on weekends, Friday and Saturday nights. And I said, I've been away from that for a while. Oh, no, work on it. So we did. He was a drummer. We had a piano player, and I played the alto or tenor sax. And came back to it, so I enjoyed that too. Of course, I got paid for it. So that was a good part. Then I did that until I started school at Ohio State. Even I went back and forth on weekends. But very interesting. Had an interesting life. And, let's say I've been very fortunate. And that's about it.
If you were speaking to an audience of younger people, how would you sum up the World War II era?
Well, first thing I would tell them that freedom is not free. When you lose your freedom, you realize that, people fight, fought, and died for freedom. Of course, I was unfortunate to die and get hurt. But I think World War II so much brought the United States population together. They were a working unit. People were working in all kinds of powers and defense plants, building airplanes, ships, and these kind of things. When Pearl Harbor happened, nobody was prepared for it. But I think that World War II really did unite the population of this country. And we know that, we're going to be free. And freedom is a precious thing. And you realize that once you lose it.
Could I ask you one more question about the prison camp? You mentioned other nationalities in other areas of the camp, and it sounds like you didn't have much contact with them at all. But did you have any small contacts with those nationalities?
There was a Russian compound next to our compound, and the French, we tried to trade food with them because they would get out on the farms and work, and they got fed pretty well. And but the Russians, they treated the Russians like they were just nothing, dirt. And we'd occasionally throw a cigarette or something over to them and watch them scramble. We felt later, hey, maybe that wasn't, Of course, we probably one or two cigarettes in them, unless you could give them all something. they were the most miserable looking POWs in the whole camp. This camp had been a slave labor camp. As a matter of fact, the American flyers had moved down there. They moved them down there just before I was shot down in the first part of October '43 from camp in Moosburg, which was near Munich, Stalag 7A. And they wanted to segregate flyers from the ground troops. You know, they'd been captured in North Africa, and of course British and French and all these. And so it was a very, very valuable experience. And I wouldn't want to do it again, but I wouldn't give $1 million for the experience. So, very, very learning experience.
My grandfather was an American prisoner of war in a Polish prison camp, North Block 64. I'd just like to ask you something I asked him when he was alive. Did you all hear anything about the concentration camps and the Jewish final solution?
As a matter of fact, on our march, one day, on our march up through Austria toward the end of the war, we came across a group of Jewish political prisoners. They all wore ragged black garments with a yellow 5-pointed star, J-E-W, Jew. And they were a pitiful bunch. And as hungry as we were, what little bit of food we had, we tried to, get close enough. They were coming the opposite direction. We tried to get close enough to, try to share something with them. And as we went further down the road, they passed by a fairly small group. As they passed by, there were several of them lying dead on the side of the road. Pitiful sight. Adolf Hitler. But, the irony, maybe it's not an irony, but I worked for a German company the last 17 years I worked. Deutsche Corporation. I was their administrative manager, benefits, insurances, personnel, these kinds of things. And I really enjoyed working with them. Of course, these people, my bosses, the first boss I had, the German boss, was one of the best guys I ever worked with. And the next two were too young to remember anything about the war. But you wonder, how the Germans could be taken in by a guy like, of course, when you realize that they were starving, inflation, and nothing, this guy comes along and promises them the moon, the sky, and everything else, and they're going to follow. Even though they're intelligent people like the Germans, they are very intelligent, industrious, hard-working people. But when people are under that kind of pressure that they were after World War I, between World War I and World War II, the first guy that comes along and promises all these things, they're going to follow him. And, can you blame them?
One, I guess, last question about that time in the prison camp. Did you meet those Serbs who were interned there? Were there Croats? Were there Bosnian Muslims?
Occasionally we'd see them walk by outside the fence as a work camp, but we didn't get to converse with them or talk with them or anything. And same way with the French and all the other nationalities. they kept us apart from, they didn't want us to be conversant with them or anything. You know. I don't know if you remember a movie called Stalag 17. Well, that was written about the camp. I know the guys who wrote it, about the camp I was in. And they put a little Hollywood into that movie, of course, to make it interesting.
Billy Wilder.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, his daughter, Catherine Wilder, produced the recent movie Memphis Belle. And of course I saw the movie 2 or 3 times, free passes. I belong to an organization called the 8th Air Force Historical Society in Atlanta. They have chapters. Now, all these folks weren't shot down, taken prisoner, but most of them flew with the 8th Air Force in World War II. And anyway, the 8th Air Force, they were the biggest, largest Air Force ever put into action during the time of conflict. And there were 33,000 fighters killed during the war. And it was, well, good time and bad time, put it that way. Some of the good, some of the times were good, it wasn't all bad. But, anyway, the 8th Air Force, we laughed at that movie, Memphis Belle. I have the original, by the way, on tape that Billy Wilder, he produced one. It was a
Documentary
film back during the war. I had that original on tape at Kmart 3 or 4 years ago. And we laughed at that Memphis Belle was put out by Catherine Wilder because all those guys talking when they're in the airplane, aircraft. And you never, you had to maintain silence first of all. You had to talk about what the girl you were with last night. And the first scene they opened up with was a big party on one of the bases. I nudged the guy, hey, you ever had any parties like that? Oh, never had. But I've had an interesting life, and I enjoy it.
Thank you for your time. You're both fine. I just would love to listen to a little bit of you showing off. And
okay, so there were 4 bunks?
That's a typical bunk, and there were 150 people in each end of a barracks of 300 people. And in the middle of the barracks, they had a little washroom where they turned the water on and they fill up everything you had.
Which, wherever you got, whatever you had to fill up.
Whatever you had to fill up. This is a typical bunk.
Well, it looks...
The mattresses were just straw in a burlap sack.
Looks freezing.
would you hold that up for the camera?
You want my mic?
I think, yeah, you're fine.
Okay. Let's see. Now, this has a little glare maybe on it. The other one I showed you didn't have the glare. Can you get that all right?
Yeah.
I believe
that's
so.
The official German.
Yeah, that's the
record.
official record. Yeah.
Could you walk a little closer to the camera so we see your photograph?
Okay.
And you were 21.
Just turned 21.
Mr. Reynard. That's, and this book is the official German record of your internment in the prison.
This here.
That piece of
this
paper.
Piece of paper.
And you made the scrapbook later?
This book was written by Ben Felton, who died not too long ago. And He, of course, hand wrote the book and then photographed it, put it together. And right after the war, he put out brochures on it to all the people who had been there, that lists of everybody. And he wanted $15 for it. Boy, that's a high price for that book. And now I understand if you can get one, it'll cost you around $100.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, that's here's a typical bunk situation. We had there were four bunks on each layer, and there were plenty of fleas and lice. And if you didn't have lice before you got there, you sure had them afterward. And you had one paper thin blanket, and the mattress was really a burlap sack, a long burlap sack filled with straw, wheat straw, and that was it.
Is there another picture in the book that you'd like to show us? The bigger ones work best for this videotape. That's a beautiful looking book.
Yeah, it's got some age on it. Right after the war, this book's 50 years old.
Have you been to the Prisoner of War Museum in Andersonville?
Yeah, we're trying to. Yeah, we've even had meetings there. When I first joined, when I first heard about the XPOW, a long time before I even heard about it, about 1983, the Department of Georgia had meetings there. In May, just around Memorial Day weekend, and then we'd go down. They always had a service there, and now we still have a meeting in Perry, and then go to Andersonville, and always have a ceremony. And I think Admiral was a POW of Vietnam era. Stockdale. He spoke the last May, and but you get you really look forward to these meetings, the state meetings, and of course we meet once a month at the Naval Supply School, the Classic City chapter of the American Ex-Prisoners of War, and we're looking for anybody ex-POW. Is your uncle still living?
No, both grandfather and father passed on.
Now, most of us are getting in our, I'm 72, I'll be 72 next month. We're getting old.
Would you mind if I came to one of your meetings, Easter or September?
The next meeting will be the second Thursday in August.
I can remember that.
Okay. Give me your name and I'll send you, I always send out a letter. Give me your name and address and I'll send you a copy of our meeting.
I'll do it.
Right now I'm the commander, and we have a lady who's the adjutant treasurer, senior vice commander, junior vice commander. As a matter of fact, our junior vice commander, Charles Beatty from Winder, I don't know if you heard of him, he went back, he was on D-Day, the 82nd Airborne. And he dropped on D-Day, and he was captured the day after because they dropped him too far inland, and of course too far away from our troops. So we were out there all by themselves, and he was captured on the second day, and he and his wife went back to the D-Day 50th anniversary over there. And he said, boy, those French people were just couldn't do enough for them. The British did. I remember, I did get back to Germany with the company I worked for, Deutz Corporation, division of Deutz in Cologne, Germany. I found, I went back with a group of dealer distributors, and the headquarters is over here in Oconee County. That's where I work, and home office. And It was interesting. I found that the Germans were much more cordial the second visit to Germany than the first time. So. All right.
I believe you.